Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We sure do appreciate your time commitment and your interest in this webinar series. My name is Ray Pepley, and I am a college and career counselor at Owyhee High School in Idaho, Meridian, Idaho specifically. I'm also the co-chair of PNACAC's Professional Development Committee. And if you don't know what PNACAC is, PNACAC stands for the Pacific Northwest Association for College Admission Counseling. And the organization serves professionals in Idaho. I'm in Idaho, so I'm gonna start with Idaho. Idaho, Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Alaska. And PNACAC, the vision of PNACAC in part is why we're here today. So you kind of answered the call. You want to learn more about these topics. You want to grow in your profession and all of that in order to best help your students and as they enter the college admission process. So why are we here today? Well, 2 years ago, PNACAC, the exec team of PNACAC formed a smaller committee with the task of reaching out to high school or to folks who work with high school students and asked about professional development needs. And so they surveyed PNACAC members and the list was pretty extensive. So we we took 8 of those topics for this webinar series, but our hope is in the future years, we'll be able to address all of those needs. That's pretty exciting. So Palmer is my co-chair. He's to the right of me. And then Patrick's our wonderful speaker today. But Palmer and I, and Patrick, we got together this summer to create this webinar series. And so when we were trying to decide on dates, we were like, okay, let's choose like a similar date each month. Let's do like the second this or the third this. And we tried not to do the the third or fourth week of the month because we didn't want to run into issues with holidays. And then we decided on the middle of the week because we wanted to be sensitive to any long weekends that people were taking. So we settled on the second Wednesday of every month. And what do you know? Many of you know, our next webinar is smack dab on National Testing Day. And we were so sick about that. And we got together and tried to find another date, and we just could not find one in October that would fit for the 3 of us. Sorry about that. So we're going to proceed with the next webinar, which is on October 12th, again at the same time. So sorry about that. But please know these webinars will be recorded and they will be available to you after the webinar ends. What we don't know yet is how that link will be shared with you. Our tech chair wasn't able to join us today, but he asked us to record it and then send it to him, the recording to him, and he'll upload it to YouTube. But we don't know if it'll be on the website or only open to those of you who registered for this course. So please watch your email and we will be in touch. Also, I don't know if you've already noticed through all this that Palmer and I are new to this. This is definitely my first Zoom webinar. My district uses Teams, and so I've learned a lot through this, but we just ask for patience as we work through this. We're excited to offer this to all of you. I'm excited for it myself to be a part of this, but please know that we're working out our kinks. So the only other thing I wanted to mention is the professional development credit that's offered with this series. Northwest Nazarene University is a private institution in Idaho that is offering professional development for the low price of $60. If you would like to register for credit, please know that NNU capped participants registration at 200. I'll go ahead and put the information about registration, the cost, and your assignment after each webinar. I'll put in information in the chat about, or in the Q&A about what those questions will be, and they'll be required after each webinar, but there'll be more information in the chat about that, or the Q&A. So, okay, so now I'm going to turn over the Zoom mic to my co-chair, Palmer.
Thanks, Ray. So yeah, my name is Palmer Muntz. I'm a regional admissions counselor with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I'm based in Washington, in Vancouver, Washington, and I'm coming to you from somewhere in Olympia right now, some random hotel room. A couple of things I wanted to mention before we get rolling. First of all, I don't know if Ray mentioned this, but we are recording these sessions. So if you want to come back and rewatch these, the link should be available at some point soon. or if you have to miss a session, you'll be able to still catch up with that. The chat is disabled for the webinar, but the Q&A is open. Feel free to put in questions for Patrick as we go through here. And when we get to the end, we'll try and go through as many of those as we can. Also, there's a function in Zoom where you can upvote questions. So we would encourage you to look to see if someone else already asked the question you wanted to answer to ask, and then do a little thumbs up on it. And that may help us to prioritize the things that the most people are curious about when Patrick is done with his presentation. With that, let me go ahead. We keep talking about Patrick, but some of you don't know who he is. I know that's hard to believe. Dr. Patrick O'Connor has been a college counselor since 1984, which happens to be the same year that I started in college admissions as well. He's worked in a variety of settings with all different students from rural, suburban, and urban backgrounds. He's the author of College is Yours, and the most recent edition of that came out in 2021, I believe, and also the author of College Counseling for School Counselors. He's a former president of the Michigan Association for College Admissions Counseling and NACAC, the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, and he was the inaugural School Counselor Ambassador to the U.S. Department of Education. That's pretty impressive. Hope you got a medal for that, Patrick. And just recently was named the 2022 Joyce E. Smith Excellence in Education Award recipient at NACAC. And with that, Patrick, we'll get out of your way and let you do what you do. Okay? Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Palmer and Ray. Thank you both for the opportunity to do this. It's always a great privilege to have a chance to chat with colleagues throughout the United States and the world about the issues of helping students find their way through a process that I think sometimes can be a little too complicated. It isn't easy applying to college, and it's not, but it also isn't rocket science. And I think particularly at this time of year, it's easy for us to think about how complicated it is. So I really appreciate folks joining us today. We can sort of get back to basics and really get back to focusing on the interest of students. And I can think of no subject that allows us the chance to sort of get back, sort of see the forest for the trees, and sort of let go of all of the mania of the fall than a discussion in fit. So let's take a look at some concepts here. What we're going to talk about today, there are sort of the 6 big pieces, but there will be some other things as well, and we'll have a chance to chat about those. Again, welcome your questions through the Q&A so that we can have that conversation and again meet the needs and the reason why you came here today, which of course is to sort of help your students. So let's chat for a minute about when we say fit, what exactly are we talking about? Well, you know, there's all kinds of definitions out there, but of course, you know, when you do this as long as I do, the definition you like most is the one that you make up yourself. So here's here are sort of 2 ways, I think, for us to sort of look at fit. The first is fit is the right mix of challenge, opportunity, and support needed to make to help a student advance their growth and achievement of their goals. And I think that's, you know, I think that's a piece that really sort of gets overlooked. We're not looking for college to overwhelm a student, but we also don't want it to be a cakewalk either. So, and so we're really looking for that balance of those 3 elements of challenge, opportunity, and support. The second piece, of course, and I think the thing that most of us are familiar with when we talk about fit, is the institutional atmosphere of a college. What does it feel like to be part of that community? And it's important when we work with students to remember that in many cases, not all, but in many cases, this isn't just going to be the place where they go to school. This is going to be their home for the next 2 to 5 years. And so it really is important for us to consider what's it going to be like to be in that home. You know, certainly there are, well, we'll talk more about this later, but you know, there may be some considerations where students are willing to go to a place that doesn't feel as comfortable as home does. But at the same time, it's important to think of this as not just choosing a college, but choosing a home. And FIT really tries to address those issues, I think. And so, right. Well, even though FIT is more of a feeling than anything else, there are some elements that we can consider when we think about the notion of FIT. The one that I think most of us think of right off the bat is its academic reputation. You know, how good is it at what it does academically in the classroom, in research fields? What exactly does it offer for students in those areas? and what can students expect in terms of homework load and in terms of studying? And so academic reputation is one of those things that we think about the most, which is important, but it's not necessarily the most important factor in a student's choice. In fact, I once had I had several students as I went on in my career who said, well, you know, I'm certainly interested in working hard, but I don't want that to be the only thing that I do when I'm in college. And many of them use the phrase full college experience when they say what they're looking for. And what they really meant was that this was a place that was going to be as much fun as it was work. And I really appreciated how honest the students were about that point, because it is important to realize that it's not just a question of going to classes and doing your homework. There is more to it than that. And that's where social reputation, I think, comes in as well. Other factors, flexibility. We realize when we talk about major, and we're going to talk a little bit more about major later on, but I'm sorry, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold here today. We realize that most students, when they go into college, if they have a major, they're going to change it. But we also know that for most students, the most popular major is undecided. Well, that's not prohibitive when it comes to FIT, because there are many schools that are designed specifically for students to not really have a major for the first year or two, so that they can choose, so that they can make the decision as they go and try some things out. I came across this with one student who went into college thinking that anthropology would be of interest to her. Well, obviously the student had never had an anthropology course in high school, so this was an educated guess, quite honestly. And as it turned out, it worked for her, but she had that first 2 years, she was smart enough to go to a school where she had that first 2 years to really sort out what she wanted to do. It turned out she was right, and now she's actually in England doing anthropology for His Majesty's government. So it worked out really well. But in any case, flexibility is a big factor. Friendliness, again, this is a big factor that has really changed, particularly with COVID. And we're seeing students with more and more needs. Sometimes they are academic needs, sometimes they're social needs, sometimes there are mental health needs. But how supportive and accessible are college personnel in helping students really make the most of the college experience? And that's a key as well. So that's a factor. Competitiveness, how supportive are students of one another? I think we're all familiar with colleges that for one reason or another have a reputation where fun comes to die. But that's and that's a different thing. I mean, there's a difference between students working hard and students treating each other with respect. So that whole competitiveness factor, particularly for the top students in your class, if they aren't thinking about this, they really should, and you should call it to their attention. It's one thing to be in the top 10 of your high school. It's something else to go to a college where everybody was in the top 10 of their high school. So for your top students, you really need to figure out, are they going to be ready for the fact that just about everybody in the class is as smart, if not smarter, than they are, and what role does that play in college selection? And then finally, a factor for some students, but certainly not all students, is town-gown relationships. Does the community around the college supportive of students? Is it antithetical to the college? Sometimes unfortunately, we see some places where the college and the town don't exactly get along very well. I have a colleague, a friend of mine, lifelong friend of mine, who works at a college where until very recently, the college is closed before the day of Halloween and before and after, because students several years ago took liberties with the town-gown relationships and sort of had a little bit of made a disruption in the town with a Halloween festival of their own choosing. So again, we want to make sure that that town-gown relationships may be a factor in fit as well. And these are, again, there are many other ways that we can define fit. You may have some as well, and if you could post those in the Q&A so that we can share those with others, that would be of great help as well. Okay. So now that we have sort of described what fit is, the next question becomes, how do we apply it in working with a student? Well, these are sort of three keys that we can think about applying fit to a student's situation. The first question, of course, is why is the student going to college and what are they looking for? This isn't always a question that students can answer. In fact, I've had the good fortune to be able to work at institutions where college was pretty much an expectation for most of the students who were in those high schools. But it's interesting, for as much as it was an expectation, if you actually ask them, why do they are they going to college? Many of them couldn't answer. Now, that doesn't mean they don't know, because sometimes it's more a feeling than it is an idea. But at the same time, it's important to keep that question front and center, because in most cases, we know that if students are thinking about why they're doing something, they're more inclined to commit to it and they get more out of it. So it is important. You may not be able to ask this question directly, but as you work with students, it's important to keep this question perpetually in the back of your head, because we need to know exactly what the student's goals are and what is it they're looking for. The best way to perhaps address this with students is not to say, why do you want to go to college? But perhaps to help get a better picture, simply ask the question, what's next? I found this question to be, and I find it to be, extremely helpful in working with students, because what basically happens here is this is a question that really asks them to think beyond college. This is a question that asks them to say, given who you are, given where you're from, given the way you see the world, where are you heading? And ultimately, this gives the student the chance to give you information that really could be helpful in putting together an effective college search. And so, if you say to a student, where do you want to go to college? That's a pretty closed-ended thing. They're going to give you, names of places. If you're lucky, they'll give you a description of what they're looking for. excuse me, but if you were to ask the question, what's next, that's when they can say, well, you know, I like my family and I like my home, but I'm really looking forward to being on my own in a new part of the world or a new part of the country. Or, well, you know, my long-term goal is to do this. You know, I'd really like to write for a living. I'd really like to achieve this. I'd really like to do that. This is a chance. You create an atmosphere in your office where students feel comfortable and supportive and eager to share with you not just their college ideas, but their life goals. And that's really what this is about. Because if we can figure out the role that college plays in those, in those life goals, then we're in a place where we're in a position to help the student. And it also, quite honestly, and I say this, that recognizing that college is an incredibly exciting experience for young people, it also sort of keeps the college experience in perspective. It is the best next thing for most students to do, but it's not the end of the world. This, you know, hopefully this is not the high point of their life. It's what's next as they continue to have perpetually greater moments in their lives as they develop their goals and their rationale for what they want to do with their lives. So I think if you really focus on the question, what's next, and keep these other questions in mind, that's going to help us sort out what students are looking for in terms of fit. Okay, so with that taken care of, we also need to talk just for a few moments about the very big difference between fit versus match. Fit is, you know, again, another aspect of the definition, because fit is multidimensional. Fit's the feel of a college and its ability to help students meet their goals in a way. Match is more along the qualities the student possesses and those the college is looking for. Match typically is centered around things like GPA, information on the college application, the strength of the student's schedule, perhaps their test scores, perhaps their essays and letters of recommendation. And so fit is more of a feeling, is more of a general sense of what the college has to offer. Match attempts to measure, and an emphasis on attempts, to measure the ability of the student to actually meet the largely academic interests and demands of the college itself. So is it possible for a student to feel that a school is a good fit, but not a good match? Yes, absolutely. And we see this challenge. This challenge can be particularly significant when it comes to students in the second quarter of your class. When I was at a school for many years, Roper School in Birmingham, where the kids were pretty bright, and it was just a real privilege to work there. But what I discovered is that the students who were in the second quarter of the class were actually sort of in a little bit of a no man's land when it came to applying to college. Why? Well, they had basically been used to all of their lives going to school with kids who love to learn, going to school with students who were very good at learning, and going to school with students who were very eager to learn. And so when it came time to applying to college, those students were applying to some pretty heavy hitter top tier schools that our second quarter students, it basically didn't match their zone very well. Well, so then the students really sort of sometimes felt stuck because they ended up going to some schools that in their opinion didn't necessarily challenge them as much, but also didn't have other students attending the school that really were sort of the heavy hitters they were used to. And that was a thing that really, it turns out, that really kept a lot of kids going. The thing that really challenges some students is the presence of other students to say, sort of create this environment that says, okay, let's jump in and let's get at this. Let's really make the most of this. And so that's sometimes one of the challenges for my second quarter students in terms of finding a good fit and match institution at the same time. So if fit is there, but not the match, sometimes I get the question, well, okay, if it's clear this student is not really going to be admitted for a whole host of reasons, why should they bother looking at the school? Well, this is where I think for me, fit is a really part of a bigger discussion, which has to do with the qualities of the learning experience that the student will have in college. I believe a good college search is really predicated on understanding the qualities of the student and the qualities of the school. And to me, that's where the essays and the teacher letters, that's where all that stuff is supposed to lead the college. Yes, it's supposed to show them whether the student is capable or not, whether they've made the most of their learning opportunities. But it's also supposed to give the college some view as to who the student is and what they value in their lives. And fit certainly talks about that, because fit is basically the idea that the student sees certain qualities in a school that appeal to them. Well, okay, if that's the case, and the student has come up with a school that they think is just really meets all their needs, but maybe a little bit beyond them in terms of grade point or test scores or other factors, it's still worthwhile to have the conversation about that institution. First of all, because I don't think we ever know for sure that a student can't get into a school until they apply, but it also makes it easier to discover other colleges that are both a good fit and a good match. So, when I had a student come into my office and say they wanted to go to Harvard, we had a conversation about what a great school that was, and that really excited the student. and then led me excuse me, and then led me to ask questions like, well, yeah, Harvard's obviously a great school. What is it about that institution that you value? What's there that isn't at other places that means a great deal to you? And that's where you get answers like, well, yeah, everybody lives on campus for 4 years, or I really like this major, or the fact that you can design your own major matters a great deal to me. Or, well, you get the idea. What happens is students start to tell you what's there that has value to them. And then it's our task as professionals to say, okay, if these are the qualities of a school that really speak to you, what other places are out there that has some, if not all of those qualities, that may be a little more tenable, it may be more affordable, it may be a better match academically. So I'm by no means suggesting that you say, oh, that's great, you're going to apply to Harvard and you have a 2.5, let's go for it. That's a different conversation. But at the same time, it's not a waste of time to talk about the value of why a place like Harvard would speak to a student with 2.5, with a 2.5, and what it means to them in particular. Because you can then take that information and help expand the list to schools that are a better fit and match. Okay, now of course, believe it or not, after all these conversations, we sometimes get to spring, and I think we've all had this experience, where a student ends up going to a place that realistically doesn't much match any of the qualities they were looking for that we had talked about when we put the list together. And so what happens if, the student says they were looking for a small rural school and end up going to NYU? Well, it may simply be that the student changed their mind and has a different set of priorities. And that's not unusual. It could be that a visit to campus, the place really spoke to them. But more important than that, it's just important to really understand that the student realizes what they're getting into. And so if we can discover the reason behind the choice, most of the time, the reason behind the choice is that the student has found other things they like about the school that they hadn't considered before. But other times, it may simply be that they don't know that the school isn't quite what they were looking for, in which case it's to our advantage to share that with them before they get to campus and are disappointed. So if you end up with a student who starts looking at schools and puts a list together where the qualities don't line up with what you've discussed, it's kind of important to have that conversation at some point, not to get the student to change their mind, as much as it is to get us to understand exactly what the student is looking for, and so we can get a better understanding as to why they're making the choices that they are. Okay, so we've chatted about fit, we've chatted about match. How do students really explore if this is the right place for them? Well, I regret to say that I am a little bit of an old school guy on this. And I realize that there are limited resources for many students these days. Having said that, I'm still a pretty big advocate for the campus visit. You know, as I say to the parents at parent nights, you know, very few parents will buy a house they haven't actually seen. Why would students try and buy a home for 4 years that they have never set foot on? And so again, I'm a bit of a champion for the campus visit, and of course, you know, that's a whole nother discussion and a whole nother topic. But there are sort of the keys there of an effective campus visit. The two that I think I would emphasize the most, particularly for first generation students, is the first one and the last one. Take the tour, but leave time for individual exploration. Many students are convinced that if all they have to do is put in the hour or so in having the guided tour of the school, that's okay, because it's important to do that, because quite frankly, it shows you what the institution values. So, you know, when one of my students took a tour where the guide got through about 45 minutes of it and said, well, okay, at this point, usually we talk about academics, but that's a different set of buildings on campus, and it's kind of cold. So let's just go back to the rock climbing wall. Well, you know, that's a small thing, but it still says a great deal about the institutional values of the place. So taking the campus visit gives you a chance to see what the school value is and what it means to them, and what certain qualities that mean to them. But you also need to figure out the reason you're on campus is to see if that's a good fit with you. And so looking around on your own is an important part of that. The last one on this list is just as important, which is, you know, find the place where things are alive. That may be the student center, it may be the rock climbing wall, it may be the library. But find the place that's really sort of the place where folks hang out. and just have the students sit there for 15 to 20 minutes and observe and people watch, right? And ask themselves, do I feel like I belong here? Is this really a place that's meant for me? The best way to do that is to submerge yourself into the humanity, into the community experience itself. And so you want to find that center of campus and see what the place really truly feels like. Now, if you can't do a campus visit, not to worry. Thanks to COVID, there are very few blessings of COVID, but one of them is that most colleges have realized that they really needed to up their game online. So while online tours used to be a videotape with a very badly narrated a description of the place, most of them are now live tours where the guides are still walking through campus and doing the narrative that they would give you if you were actually with them. So this is better mimicking the actual campus experience, campus visit itself. In addition to that, there's also the presentation and Q&A at the end. Most of these places, most of these schools have now paired themselves with institutions where, or have paired their visitation with a Q&A session and a chance to interact on a live basis. So again, thanks to COVID, efforts are now underway to try and really make the online tour more of an interactive experience rather than just a sit and get, which is highly valuable. So the high school visit, again, another great way to get some idea as to what the college is like. And I think, you know, if you're new to this, or if you don't have many colleges visiting your high school, see what you can do to improve that. Again, sometimes they're doing online visits. That's okay, but what we're seeing again with admissions officers who do these high school visits and these high school interactions, much more attention is now being paid to the officers, really trying to talk about what the place feels like. And so so the high school visit can really help do that. It also helps students, gives students an opportunity to get their name out there by asking questions and having conversations with admissions officers. You know, I know of, in many cases, I had high school visits when I was a high school counselor, where students would attend and they would be the only one in the visit session. Well, that was actually okay in most cases, because it actually allowed the student to sort of have basically an interview with the admissions officer. And for the students who made the most of that opportunity, you know, many of them ended up getting admitted and even getting scholarship offers that I honestly don't think would have been available had they not bothered to show up. So this is a great opportunity for students to identify and stand out from the crowd, because they're taking the time to do what others either can't or choose not to do. So I think, again, the high school visit is a great way to sort of explore fit as well. Okay, college guides, certainly there are some out there that can be helpful. And remember that as we talk about college guides, I am not talking about college rankings, because I am not a fan of college rankings. But rather, I think a good college guide is a place that basically says, here's what the school is all about. Whether you want to go there or not is up to you. To me, the best place that does that is, of course, the Fisk guide. This is a guide that's updated every year by Fisk and his colleagues. Not every college in the United States, however, is listed in the Fisk guide. And so that can sometimes limit the resources. But if it is in the Fisk guide, it's well worth the read of the institution, because it's not just about academics, it's about social elements, it's about the town. If you're really looking for sort of fit in the written word, the Fisk guide is one of the best places you could possibly turn to. Rugg's recommendations on the colleges has always been a valuable first source for me. And I think some folks who may know Rugg's may be surprised to think that I'm recommending it as a source of fit. It is in the sense of academic major. Basically, what Rugg's does is they go to college campuses and they evaluate the quality of a particular academic program by asking students two questions. What are you majoring in, and are you happy there? It's not scientific, but it sure is effective. And so Rugg's ends up giving you a whole list of schools by major that students should consider if they're looking to study that at college. It's a nice place to sort of get a first feel, again, particularly for academic fit. And even though the last Rugg's was published 3 years ago, it's still remarkably effective, in large part because most institutions really haven't changed their offerings in the last 3 years, thanks to COVID. So I think Rugg's is still a pretty good buy this year, at least. And I've heard rumblings that they're planning on bringing Rugs back. Fred Rugg retired 3 years ago, the founder of Rugs. But the talk is that perhaps they'll be coming back with an updated edition in the next coming years. Okay. So then we're talking about college open houses. Many times students will say, well, should I go visit a campus or should I participate in the open house? My answer is basically, you do whatever you can do to get there. If you truly have a choice between one or the other, I tend to lean a little bit more on the individual campus visits simply because I think it can be personalized more. But nonetheless, the open house provides additional programming and chances to talk with college personnel that may be a little too busy to talk to you during the regular college days. So open houses are nice times with dedicated focus on the needs of the students. It doesn't quite give you the same natural feel of a campus visit, which is why, again, I'm more of a champion of campus visits, but it's still a worthwhile endeavor, especially since it's on a weekend, and especially for many families, that's the only time mom and dad can get away. So college open houses are by no means a waste of time. I just think an individual visit could be a little bit better. Okay, and then alumni visits. Certainly another way to really understand what a school is all about is to make sure you're in touch with the folks who've graduated from your high school who are going to that college. The things that you learn from sort of the inside version, the inside story, can really be monumentally helpful, especially if a college is new to you as a counselor. The folks who are visiting or the folks who have graduated rather, and then come back to say hello, chatting with them briefly about their experience and what it means to them really can sort of help you understand what other kinds of students might benefit from that school, and just as important, what students may not. This is especially true for those handful of students that I think we all tend to get who will come in December or November and say, yeah, this just isn't quite what I was looking for. I think I need to try something else. Make the most of that learning opportunity for yourself. Find out what the student had expected and why it is this place didn't meet those goals. And it may be that the students' goals have changed, which is, of course, is a very different thing. But it also may be that they didn't exactly look in the right places to get the cues they needed to make a strong decision. So those alumni visits, putting together an alumni panel at lunch, putting together at night, can really be helpful. It can help students, but it can also help the parents, which is sometimes just as important, if not more important than it is in terms of helping the students. So now, of course, the other thing to keep in mind, however, is that for some students, they may have just have a different need and different goals than most students. And so it could be that the school is just fine, but this student was not keenly aware of what they were getting into. And so you want to keep that in mind as well. I once had a student who came to an alumni visit, determined to sort of contradict the advice that I give, which is, yes, picking a college based on fit is important, but once you get past that, it's then entirely up to you in terms of if you make the most of it. Well, she vehemently disagreed and said, no, if a college doesn't have this, and this, you're not going to succeed no matter what you do. So we had to have some discussion about that, some of it public, about why I kind of saw things differently than the student did. So again, you may end up with some students who have an axe to grind, but if that's the case, diplomatically working with them and guiding them back to the general point will give students and everyone much more to consider. Okay, again, there may be other ways to explore fit that you have discovered with your students, and again, encourage you to put those remarks in the Q&A and the chat. so that we can share those with others. Okay, so now we start talking about a few specific points as it relates to fit. First is the role of major. And I think we've all sort of run into this where we have students who are convinced that they want to go to a school that's the best in this particular major. We certainly don't want to discourage that kind of thinking. If a student has found that engineering is really their life's calling, then of course there are, certain schools that have really strong reputations in engineering that quite frankly may not have as strong a reputation in anything else. So as we put together the role of major and fit, let's keep in mind first that it varies widely by student. And we know that for as committed as students can be, the average student will change their major 3 times once they're in school. Let me say that again. The average student will change their major 3 times once they're actually at college. So, and this is not to be condescending, it's not to be disrespectful of students, who come to your office and say with absolute conviction, this is what I want to do with my life, because they may very well end up doing that. But at the same time, it is important to give some thought to the larger question of, well, what if we get to calculus and all of a sudden it turns out that engineering may not be the best fit? What do we do then? And so questions we need to consider as if a student comes to us with a school based on major, is this the only real major that the school has? Is it not necessarily well known for anything else? That doesn't mean we say no to the student. It doesn't mean we discourage that application. But it does mean that we make sure the student knows what they're getting into as they apply to that institution. How certain is the student of their intended major? We particularly run into this with students who are majoring in the arts, because very often they get into, I've had a number of students who get into visual or performing arts as a major, and after about a year in realize that this is going to be a big part of their lives, but they don't necessarily want it to be the thing they do all the time. Well, okay, if that's the case, transferring out of that major has some challenges. There are many places that are very good art schools and very good visual performing arts schools that quite frankly, their other majors are sometimes a little bit lacking. And certainly the other factor is that the students may end up losing credits. Music theory doesn't exactly transfer very well into a business major, for example. So we need to understand how committed is the student to their major, and if that's the case, should we be looking at schools that offer a wide variety of strong majors, not just the one that the student's interested in? How open is the student to transferring? Again, this is sort of more of an extreme measure, but if there are students who end up applying to a school because it has this major and then it doesn't work out, for some of them, the better answer is not to try and make the best of the other options at that school, but instead is to transfer and look at other schools as well. And so that's a factor to consider. As we talked about previously, most students are undecided as a major. Does the college's structure support that? Do our students encouraged to try out and sample a wide array of classes and programs in their first couple of years? Or is this a school where it's like, no, you pick a major and then off you go? Something we see a lot more of in the United Kingdom, for example, with their academic approach, where students declare a major from day one, and that's it. So, you have to know what you're getting into in terms of the college's flexibility with undecided students. So, and then some students will need to understand that there are some points where once you change your major, you're not necessarily going to be able to take all those credits with you, even if you're staying at the same college. So they need to understand that if they need some more time to explore what their choices are, you're not discouraging that, but that could lead to a commitment beyond what is the traditional 4 years And that, of course, has significant life implications as well as financial costs that the student needs to consider, or that the family may wish to consider as they consider this institution on the list. Okay, fit and affordability, right? And so, again, the question that's really driven here has something to do, goes something along the lines like this. Well, it's really nice that your child wants to go to NYU, but NYU is extremely expensive and offers very little financial aid. So, what realistically, unless we're willing to go into debt significantly, NYU is probably not a good choice for us. Well, again, my perspective has always been that cost should rarely be a prohibition to applying, as long as the list of institutions aren't completely listed, rich with students, colleges that cost $80,000 a year. So when you build the list, you really need to give some thought to affordability, and of course that's a much bigger discussion for another day. But things like scholarships, things like honors colleges, things like distance from home. This is all why it's important to talk about qualities of a school. If a student ends up falling in love with NYU, let's talk more about why is that? Is it an urban setting? Is it because there's no real campus to speak of? Is it a specific major? What exactly is there that's appealing to the student? That's because this will, again, give you the fuel you need to continue a search with the student of other options that will offer the same sense of fit, but not necessarily affect their wallet as much. So again, recognizing that affordability is an imperative for most families these days, that's important, but it's also important to realize that an affordable bad choice is really not affordable at all. So you need to make sure that fit and affordability go hand in hand. Again, I believe the best pursuit of this is that fit should lead, but affordability will often be a close second. Okay, heading towards the finish and looking forward to your questions here. The wrong use of fit. What I started to see towards the end of time in my last institution was a number of students and parents who sort of tried to use fit as a weapon against the counselor, which I thought was sort of interesting, because I would say, well, I'd really try and look for an answer that showed some depth, that the student had spent some time thinking about why this school made sense to them. And the answer that I would get is, well, it's a good fit. And it's like, no, I need a little bit more. We can come to that conclusion, but what have you discovered about the place that leads you to that conclusion? And again, I recognize that for many students, it isn't easy to articulate why they make the choices that they do. But at the same time, it helps ask the question, because it helps to keep those qualities at the forefront of the student's mind as they begin to compare and look at other schools. Very often, the students were basically saying the fit is good, and it basically meant it's a named school that my parents would be happy that I get admitted to. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's also much more to a school choice than that, especially if the student intends on being happy. So these questions that are listed here really give you the opportunity to explore the qualities the student is looking for without really being threatening. You're not saying, well, this is a bad choice. What you're saying is, tell me more about this choice. And going to that approach, tell me more about this choice, really is part of our job as we try to expand and make sure the student has looked at everything. Picking a college is much like going to a new restaurant. The best way to really sort of understand what your full array of choices are is to read the entire menu. And our job as professionals is to help students do that as much as you possibly can without overwhelming them. These questions will often help do that as it relates to putting together a comprehensive list meaning options that will be meaningful to the student. Okay, finally, the other question that I sometimes get, or the comment I sometimes get from some counselors is, you know, I work in a high school that has a lot of first generation students whose parents didn't go to college, or they're low income kids. And realistically, the local four-year college as a commuter option, or the local community college, is realistically the only choice that these students have. Well, okay. I always urge counselors to try and avoid that mindset if possible, even if it's true. Why? Well, because college is a place to start over. College is the ultimate do-over for many of our students. It's the chance to say, nobody cares who you were in ninth grade. They may care, they may not care, but they don't know. And so you get a chance to really begin your reputation and set your life anew. And this is the fresh start. If you're looking for a fresh start, this is it. This is one of them. So as you go into this fresh start, we really need to talk more about what there is to look forward to rather than why it is you're stuck with this answer. And so again, using the points here on the screen, having a conversation to talk about fit, again, goes back to qualities in the school, and talking to a student and say, well, okay, but what's there that you're looking forward to? I understand that you felt limited. I understand how that can be frustrating. But let's talk a little bit about what may be there that's pretty great. This may require a little bit of research on your part. If the student is interested in being participating in the debate team, and is now disappointed because their college has no debate team, this may be a time to call up student services at that college and say, I got a kid interested in debate. I know you don't have a debate team, but what are your options out there? This is where you can make some connections and be a hero by making those connections before the student hits campus, to make sure that there's a smooth transition, and to make sure that the student begins the process of going to college with an outlook that talks about what's possible rather than what they're stuck with. And I think that makes a step, that process desirable. If that doesn't work, certainly you can have conversations about transfer. Most colleges these days are very good at having together transfer guides that say, okay, it didn't work out this time in terms of freshman admission, but here's what you need to do if you want to transfer, and here's what we're looking for in terms of coursework. They're really trying to minimize the number of courses students have to take twice. They're trying to maximize the number of courses the students will take, the college will accept as transfer credit that will go towards a degree. And that's really the important piece of transfer credit. So exploring transfer as a team at this point actually can give the students something to look forward to in terms of the importance of the first school, because they now understand the grades and the experience they have in that first school will then affect their ability to successfully make the most of life in their second school. Okay, so there's the quick whirlwind guided tour of the world of fit, and I hope my presentation did not give you a fit. Hoping that was helpful, and looking forward to answering your questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Patrick. I actually learned quite a bit. I appreciate you. There are some questions in the chat or in the Q&A, but I did want to mention, I know some of you might need to leave, but Patrick had mentioned to Palmer and I that he's happy to hang out past the hour to answer these questions. So, and then again, this is being recorded, so we'll send it out to all of you when we have that available. Yeah, so, and then really quick, because some of you might be leaving, just as a reminder, October, yes, it's on national, our next one is on National Test Day. Sorry about that, but it will be recorded for all of you and sent out. So.
Yeah, and let me urge folks to participate in that, because the good news is that if it is on tape and you're watching it, you can actually speed it up. It's like Netflix, and so instead of having me drone at you for an entire hour, I can drone at you for 40 minutes instead, which my family tells me is an immense blessing. So, please don't go past the October title and discussion is a great one, and I don't want you to miss that. So let me urge you to participate in any way you can.
I have to point out, it is very ironic that our
Yep.
topic is to test or not to test, and we're conflicting with the PSAT date. But
We're amateurs, everybody. Well, not Patrick, but Palmer and I. Okay, so I'm going to start with the Q&As, Patrick, and I'm going to start with the ones that had the most upvotes. So, and we don't have that many, but maybe some others are typing now.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead. Nicole asks, regarding fit, consider how well an institution supports a diverse, this is a comment, I think. Her comment regarding fit, Nicole said, consider how well an institution supports a diverse population. Looking at graduation rates by race can help students of color make a decision in finding a supportive school and environment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, sorry that I didn't get to that, but that is an excellent point. The other way, of course, to do it is to get in touch with the student affairs office and say, and ask, what's the role of sororities and fraternities? What are the roles of, if you have a student with special needs, talking to the academic readiness office? Lots of ways to talk about fit in those respects as well. Great point.
Thank you, Nicole. And then Carrie asks, are there recommendations for outlined search engines when helping students finding colleges and making their college list? That's a great question.
Yes. Well, I have to admit, I hate to say this because it's sort of a looking backwards sort of answer. I always found Big Future to be extremely helpful with this tool, because it had so many different variables that were in play. The new version doesn't seem to really offer as much flexibility, but I must admit I'm still a fan. The other place that I've used that's been very helpful has been CapEx as well. So I think those two, but again, if you have Naviance, if you have Score, those two programs have some kind of search engine. Start with those because they're free, but then I would have you take a look at the other two as well.
Yeah, great. And then Donna's comment is, love the alumni or current student visit. She said, I do this with students when they come home at Christmas or other holidays, and my current students love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I liked that. I hadn't done that before. That's a great idea. And then Tanya, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. She wants to know, or they want to know, will the PowerPoint be available after the session? Great question. What do you think, Patrick, with this PowerPoint?
Well, yes, it just so happens that I paid my bills before I did the presentation, and I'm a little short on the mortgage. So no, I'll be happy to email this to Ray and Palmer, let them work their magic so that the PowerPoint will be available for you all to see.
Yeah. Michelle asks, what was the second search engine you mentioned? And that was CapEx. Well, what'd you say? CapEx, I think?
CapEx, yes.
CapEx.
CAPPEX, yeah.
Yeah. And then Matt, hi Matt, he wants to know, what ways have you found helpful in de-emphasizing college guides that use college rankings when there is such a large public, parental, school admin, college marketing, and other news media outlets that use them in helping students explore their fit, their college search?
Yes. Well, this is actually, I could actually spend about 3 weeks on this, because this is one of those things that even after 40 years still makes me stay awake at night. But the short version of this, Matt, is ask the parent this question. It's usually the parent that we have to sort of talk off the roof here. Simply say, how well does the person who's making the rankings know your child?
Mm.
And basically what a rankings is an ideal list of colleges for somebody, but it's not an ideal list of colleges for your child, because they don't know who your child is. What are they looking for? What does your child want out of the experience? What are their specific have-tos? Rankings don't do any of that. Harvard's a great school unless you want to be a plumber, in which case there's no point in going to Harvard. So, because rankings are missing those key elements that individualize the process, they are of no value whatsoever, in my opinion.
Well, thank you. Okay, so John is our final question for now. And John's question is great because I was dealing with this just yesterday.
Oh, okay.
What have you found to be the best way to encourage a student to find a college that is a strong fit for themselves when they're clearly dealing with heavy parental pressure on college choice?
Yeah. The one thing you want to do with any conversation you're having about college is you never want the student to be stuck in the middle and feel alone. And so, the short answer to this question is, this is kind of your job. Don't put this on the student, because the student's going in, with an arm tied behind their back, because they know about what's best for them, but they don't know the wild world of college admissions like you do. So it's time for you to apply your expertise and say, I've had a chat with your child, and here are the qualities they're looking for, and there are a number of schools out there that really have those qualities. And while the school you're looking for has some of them, we tend to encourage our students to look at several options for a whole number of reasons, and you share those, and really try and leave the parents with the importance of choice as it relates to at this stage of the process, which of course is the application process, and why it's important to make sure the student doesn't feel they have just one choice at this time.
Patrick, can I ask a couple of questions myself?
Sure, Palmer.
One was that you mentioned the Rugs guide, and you said you thought that the last edition was about 3 years old. When I did a quick search on Amazon just now, the last edition I saw posted there was, I think, from 2009. Do you know where the newer editions might be found?
Wow. Well,
or does just time fly?
Yeah, no, my goodness, that would be a surprise to me. Because I've talked to Fred Rugg last year, and I thought he said that he had put one together about 3 years ago.
So it may not be on. Okay, so Shannon in the question and answer
Yeah.
just posted the direct link to Rugg's recommendations.
Yep.
But why would you do that when Amazon's there?
Yeah.
So, another comment I wanted to make.
Palmer, I'm sorry, if I could just follow up
Yes.
on that. Rugs is only available through Rugs.
Okay. Okay.
And so when you buy it, they actually send you a PDF download that you print and promise not to share.
Gotcha.
So if you're looking for this through the Amazon world, you will happily.
Thank you.
It's like death to Ticketmaster. You will not have the privilege of doing anything in Amazon. You got to do it through Fred.
Perfect. Thank you. This is kind of an old school comment about fit.
Yeah.
Curious what other people would think, but I encourage students, as they're visiting campuses, if there's a school newspaper, to grab that. And also, again, a very old school thing is to look at the flyers that are posted on the bulletin boards and so on around campus. Because I think that gives you a lot of sort of insight into the culture and the conflicts of the campus.
Yes, well, and I think that's especially true if the student is interested in aspects of the culture that may be a little unusual. My brother was a real advocate of folk music when he was applying to colleges. Well, if had he come to me as a college counselor, I don't know that I could have helped him much with that. But the places you've mentioned are ideal spots where that kind of stuff can flourish, and so paying attention to those are very important as well.
I just wanted to mention one of the assignments for the NNU credit is for those pursuing the credit to share a resource that they have either been using for finding your fit, or they'll do maybe some research after that today, and then they'll be sharing it with us. So we're going to get all those resources out.
That's excellent. Oh,
yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Yep. Yep. No, for folks that are new to this process, two pieces of advice from the old guy here. First, there's no such thing as a bad question. And anybody that makes you feel bad about asking a question is their problem, not yours. That this is how I got started. It's how Palmer got started. It's not how Ray got started. Ray came from the womb knowing everything about college admission.
Oh my gosh, no.
But but for most of us, this is the most important way. And if something comes new to you, don't hesitate to, real quick question. So I had a student who came in and I said, well, what do you want to do? And they said, well, I want to study tigers. And I thought, well, and again, remember, I'm from Michigan, born and raised in Detroit. And so I said, not a problem. We actually have 2 alumni in the Detroit Tigers ticket office, a management office, and we can set you up with an internship. He said, no, not those kind of Tigers. So, here I was, a past president of NACAC with all kinds of experience. And I had a student who wanted to major in Tigers. Well, this was brand new to me. So I went on the NACAC e-list. And if you're not familiar with the NACAC exchange, I would encourage you to look up NACAC exchange. You do not have to be a member to participate. But that was a place where I went and I said, I got a kid who wants to study tigers. Can you help me out here? And within an hour, I had 4 answers. One of them was from India. And so, I could have looked at that stuff till the cows came home, and never come up with those answers. So, don't hesitate to use each other in meaningful ways. And when those opportunities arise, jump at them. You're busy people. And so the opportunity that you have to make the most of those learning opportunities, take full advantage of them.
See that Shannon popped a question in here before we wrap up.
Sure.
Do you have any favorite online resources specifically geared towards first-generation students or students of color?
Oh, golly.
It could be that other participants might have some to suggest as a follow-up.
Yeah, I would urge colleagues to jump in on this because I do, unfortunately, these are a couple of those that are so ingrained in my memory, I can't remember what the website is. But there are actually some really great videos on YouTube. For example, why you should attend an HBCU. That's really a meaningful one. There's actually some on why you shouldn't attend an HBCU, which I think for balance is pretty good as well. But I would urge colleagues to sort of jump in on that one as we progress.
Well, I was going to say, I love the option of the NACAC exchange. I have never used that. So would that even be a resource we could use to ask that type of a question?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, that might be something as we send out the recording.
Yes.
Perhaps we can send a link to the NACAC exchange and so on, just as a resource for folks who may not be familiar.
Yeah.
It's very accessible.
No, I know that in recent time, the college admission counselors Facebook group has sort of become the place of choice for most folks to participate. But if you're not a Facebook fan, Exchange is still a great place to go and got some great expertise there. I would urge you, if you're new to the profession, don't hesitate to say that in your postings. Say, first time caller, been here less than 5 years, need a hand, because then the folks will who may otherwise take umbrage that you're asking about good English programs will be thoughtful toward you.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Patrick. Thank you for those of you who were able to stay with us past the hour. Like I said, we'll send copy or the link to this recording to all of you, copy of the PowerPoint and the NNU information in an email. So yeah, we'll be in touch, and we hope to see many of you on October 12th. Those of you who can join us.
Ray, Palmer, thanks again for the chance to do this. Thanks to everybody for hanging in there, and be well. Have a good month.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Palmer.